Persia, and he was a pagan king, but he was anointed by the Lord to lead the people out of captivity.
Right. And so this is, remember that Isaiah is telling them this way before it happens, right? So Cyrus hasn't been born yet, but the Lord is already telling them, once they go into exile in Babylon, Cyrus is the one who's going to liberate them. Yep. What else?
God is sovereign creator of all things, the outcome of what he desires, including righteousness. Salvation and righteousness will flourish together.
That's right. And he keeps talking about how he's the creator, how he's sovereign, he's the redeemer, he's the holy one. Why does he keep repeating that stuff? I mean, because we have short memories. I know that. But in the context, why do those things matter?
Because in contrast to idols.
That's right, because it's a contrast to idols. So all through these sections, he keeps bringing up this contrast between himself and the idols, the false gods of the nations. And one of the things that he's mentioned with Cyrus is, which of the false gods has foretold the future? Which of the false gods has said ahead of time, the liberator's coming and this is who he's going to be and this is what he's going to do? Why is the Lord telling them all these things ahead of time? So that when it happens, they'll trust him. It's going to be difficult, it's going to be painful, they're going to go through suffering, but in the middle of that, he's already given them prophecies that make it very clear he is in control. He's fully in control when they go into Babylon, and he will be fully in control when they come out of it. Okay, anything else?
It just reminded me about Jesus. He told the disciples a lot of times what was going to happen.
Yeah?
So that when it did happen, they wouldn't be surprised, first of all. But that now they knew for sure that he was God.
That's right.
Because he knew what was going to happen. That was really interesting.
Yes. That's right. Anything else from last week? Okay, I'm going to read actually one verse from chapter 45 because it connects to what's coming today. So in 45:20, he said, "Gather together and come, assemble you fugitives from the nations. Ignorant are those who carry about idols of wood, who pray to gods that cannot save." Chapter 46, which we're going to look at next, is basically an elaboration of those two lines from 45:20, those last two lines. Ignorant are those who carry about idols of wood, who pray to gods that cannot save, and the key link word is carry. Is your God a God that you carry, or is your God a God who carries you? That's going to be the contrast between the idols from last week and this week and the Lord. Okay, so let's look at chapters 46 and 47. 46 verse 1. Bel bows down, Nebo stoops low. Their idols are borne by beasts of burden. The images that are carried about are burdensome, a burden for the weary. They stoop and bow down together, unable to rescue the burden. They themselves go off into captivity. Listen to me, O house of Jacob, all you who remain of the house of Israel, you whom I have upheld since you were conceived and have carried since your birth. Even to your old age and gray hairs, I am he. I am he who will sustain you. I have made you, and I will carry you. I will sustain you, and I will rescue you. To whom will you compare me, or count me equal? To whom will you liken me, that we may be compared? Some pour out gold from their bags and weigh out silver on the scales. They hire a goldsmith to make it into a god, and they bow down and worship it. They lift it to their shoulders and carry it. They set it up in its place, and there it stands. From that spot it cannot move. Though one cries out to it, it does not answer. It cannot save him from his troubles. Remember this, fix it in mind, take it to heart, you rebels. Remember the former things, those of long ago. I am God, and there is no other. I am God, and there is none like me. I make known the end from the beginning, from ancient times, what is still to come. I say my purpose will stand, and I will do all that I please. From the east I will summon a bird of prey, from a far-off land a man to fulfill my purpose. What I have said, that will I bring about. What I have planned, that will I do. Listen to me, you stubborn-hearted, you who are far from righteousness. I am bringing my righteousness near. It is not far away, and my salvation will not be delayed. I will grant salvation to Zion, my splendor to Israel. Go down, sit in the dust, virgin daughter of Babylon. Sit on the ground without a throne, daughter of the Babylonians. No more will you be called tender or delicate. Take millstones and grind flour. Take off your veil, lift up your skirts, bare your legs, and wade through the streams. Your nakedness will be exposed and your shame uncovered. I will take vengeance. I will spare no one. Our Redeemer, the Lord Almighty is his name, is the Holy One of Israel. Sit in silence, go into darkness, daughter of the Babylonians. No more will you be called Queen of Kingdoms. I was angry with my people and desecrated my inheritance. I gave them into your hand, and you showed them no mercy. Even on the aged, you laid a very heavy yoke. You said, I will continue forever, the eternal queen, but you did not consider these things or reflect on what might happen. Now then, listen, you wanton creature, lounging in your security and saying to yourself, I am, and there is none besides me. I will never be a widow or suffer the loss of children. Both of these will overtake you in a moment, on a single day, loss of children and widowhood. They will come upon you in full measure, in spite of your many sorceries and all your potent spells. You have trusted in your wickedness and have said, no one sees me. Your wisdom and knowledge mislead you when you say to yourself, I am, and there is none besides me. Disaster will come upon you, and you will not know how to conjure it away. A calamity will fall upon you that you cannot ward off with a ransom. A catastrophe you cannot see will suddenly come upon you. Keep on then with your magic spells and with your many sorceries which you have labored at since childhood. Perhaps you will succeed, perhaps you will cause terror. All the counsel you have received has only worn you out. Let your astrologers come forward, let those stargazers who make predictions, month by month, let them save you from what is coming upon you. Surely they are like stubble. The fire will burn them up. They cannot even save themselves from the power of the flame. Here are no coals to warm anyone. Here is no fire to sit by. That is all they can do for you. These you have labored with and trafficked with since childhood. Each of them goes on in his error. There is not one that can save you. Okay, how does chapter 46 begin in verses 1 and 2?
See how useless these images are.
Mm-hmm.
You can't. They can't even carry themselves without understanding what they're
That's
saying.
right. Yep. It's a sort of pathetic picture. It's not sort of. It is. It's a pathetic picture.
Are Bel and Nebo, are they cities, or what is Bel and Nebo?
No, they're gods.
Oh, those are gods.
Yes. So there's some background to these opening verses that actually sets the tone for the whole chapter. So Bel and Nebo were the names of two of the Babylonian gods. Bel is a title, it means Lord. It's a variation on Baal. So it's a title that means Lord, and it was a title that was applied specifically to the Babylonian god Marduk, because he was the highest of all the Babylonian gods, and he was the city god of the capital, Babylon. Nebo was Bel's son. And let me just read a little background for you. Nebo was the patron god of wisdom and the art of writing. And his function was to write on the tables of destiny the fates decreed by the gods for the coming year. So every year at the New Year festival for the Babylonians, Nebo was brought from his temple and carried in procession with his father, Bel, through the streets to a great shrine. It was the greatest religious event of the year, the center around which the whole pagan environment revolved. It was an impressive celebration year by year of the power of Babylon and its gods. Okay, so here's Isaiah taking this image of a yearly procession that was done by the Babylonians, where they would haul Bel and Nebo through the streets. They would haul the idols through the streets. And it's interesting that Nebo's particular role among all the gods is to declare what's coming for the next year. Mm-hmm. He's going to make it known to the people of Babylon whatever destiny has decreed for them for the next year. Well, Isaiah takes that image and then he uses it for his own purposes, because he says, here's this picture of Bel and Nebo bowing down and stooping low. The idea being that they're becoming weakened and weary. And they're being transported by worshipers who are also using animals. And the idols are burdensome and wearisome. So both the gods and the people and the animals who carry them are all becoming weak and weary together. And since neither can rescue the other, where do they end up? At the end of 2, where are they? Captivity. Mm-hmm. That's where they're headed. The gods can't save the peoples can't save the gods. Everybody's tired. from this, hauling their gods around. I mean, of course, if you have to carry your own god, it's going to make you exhausted. And in the end, nobody can save anybody else, and they all end up going into captivity. Now, in contrast, what does the Lord say about himself in verses 3 and 4?
He says, I have made you and I will carry you even when you are older. So he will never leave us.
That's right. So in contrast to the Babylonians, the remnant of Israel has a very different kind of God. When have they ever carried their God? Have they carried their God?
Yeah. They carried the tabernacle.
Mm-hmm.
They did
And they carried the ark.
the ark, yes, the ark.
Did they carry their God?
No.
No. In fact, there's a place in 1 Samuel where they start to act like they're carrying their God because they haul him into battle thinking that'll make him fight for them, and they get disillusioned very quickly. They have never carried their God, not once, ever. Rather than being carried, the Lord has carried them, and he's carried them from the very beginning. He says he's upheld them from the very start. So he uses this picture of, children and parents. Children grow up and don't need to be carried anymore, and at some point they might even begin to carry their parents. But not so with God and his people. They don't carry him, he carries them, and he will do that forever. He says even to their old age, he's the God who sustains them. He made them, he will carry them, sustain them, and rescue them. Now that's a startling message to people whose nation has been conquered, their capital city's been sacked, their temple's been leveled, and they themselves are in exile in Babylon. For God to say to them, when they're in exile, that he has always carried them, he still is carrying them, and he will continue to carry them even while they suffer. That's important because, unlike the Babylonian gods, the roles are never reversed. The Lord never stops carrying his people, even when everything appears to fall apart. So, for them, the last word won't be captivity. What's going to be the last word for God's people instead of captivity? Deliverance. That's right. So they're in the middle of terrible suffering, but when your God is a God you have to carry around, the last word's captivity. But if your God carries you through the middle of that suffering, the last word will be deliverance. That's what's coming for the people of God. Mm-hmm.
Is this sort of a promise?
What do you mean?
Like a promise of God. I will sustain you, I will carry you, I will rescue you. I mean, it's comforting.
Well, does it apply to us?
Yes.
Of course it does, right? He carries us just like he carried them, doesn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't carry our God, he carries us. And how long does he carry us?
From birth to old age with gray hairs and death.
Uh-huh. And then when you die, does he stop carrying you that day? No, because he owns the other side of the grave, right?
Yeah.
So he's not going to carry you up to the point of death. He's going to carry you through death. You're going to come out the other side of that in the resurrection, and he's still going to be carrying you. That's the difference between the Lord and all of these false gods, is he never, ever, ever stops carrying his people. Okay, now, what does he add then in verses 5 to 7?
To whom will you compare me, or make me equal to, liken me to, compare me with? Some weigh out silver on the scales and hire goldsmiths to make a god, and they bow and they worship it. They carry it, set it in place, and there it stands, and there it stays. They cry to it, no answer. It cannot save them from their troubles.
Mm-hmm. So when he says, with whom will you compare him? Who will you liken him to? He doesn't answer the question. What's the answer? Nobody, right? He doesn't even bother to say it. There's nobody like him. The Lord is completely unique. And again, you just get this, the foolishness of idolatry. When idol worshipers make their own God, they weigh out the gold and silver for it. They decide where to put it, and wherever they put it, it stays there. Like a potted plant, you know? There was a woman in Riverton who was like, and then you put it in the corner of your house, and then you have to dust it. I don't want a God I have to dust. I mean, the foolishness is so obvious, isn't it? That if you put your God there and he can't move and you have to dust him, He can't save you. It's a God who's not worth worshiping because he can't save you. Okay, now, after laying into the idolaters, now he's going to lay into his own people. So what does he say to them in verses 8 to 11?
Well, again, he reminds them that he is God, and he tells them to remember the former things of old that they have witnessed.
That's right. So he starts, verse 8, remember this. And by this, I think he means the foolishness of idolatry. The fact that the God of Israel is in a category all his own. He says, remember it. Stand firm, call it to mind, take it to heart. Pay attention, he says, and stop wavering. Did you notice that he called the people rebels right there? Do you have something similar to that in your translation? Transgressors, yep. Why? Because his own people are tempted toward unbelief just like the pagans are. They're rebelling against him. They're turning to false gods that they like better. I'm sure that's a temptation for people who end up in exile, to look around and think, well, the Babylonian gods must be more powerful than our God. And here's the Lord saying, don't be fooled by that. That's not the case. They're not real. They might turn to those gods, but it's not going to get them anywhere. So he says, remember also the former things of long ago, all the things he's done from the beginning. He is God, and there is no other. He is God, and there is no God like him. His people might not understand what he's doing, but they should know him. They should know that in the middle of difficult circumstances, he is who he is. And if they know their God, then the question is, will they trust him? Will they trust him when they don't get it? Will they trust him when it's hard? Will they trust him because they know who he is? Okay, now verses 10 and 11 then just reassert the Lord's claim of unique sovereignty. Well, what does he say in 10 and 11? Well, we talked about making known the end from the beginning, from ancient times, what is still to come. What else? What does he say right
My counsel will stand and I will accomplish my purpose.
there? And then what does he mention in particular in verse 11?
Well, a bird of prey from the east, and then what sounds like Cyrus,
That's right.
from a far-off land, a man to fulfill my purpose.
Yes.
And what I've said I'll bring about, what I plan I will do.
Right. So the Lord makes known the end from the beginning because he was there before everything, and he will bring to pass whatever's still to come, and when it's all over, he'll still be there. So whatever he purposes happens, and nobody can thwart him. He will do whatever he pleases. And specifically, he summons nations and kings to do his will. So he summons this man from a far-off land in the east to come and conquer, and you're right, he is talking about Cyrus. And the point of all of that is to remind them he's sovereign. So will they trust him? Here's the thing. The Lord doesn't play down their troubles. He doesn't play down their suffering. He doesn't act like it's not going to hurt. It is. Like it's not going to be confusing. It will be. But will they trust him in the middle of that? That he already has the deliverance sorted. And he's telling them ahead of time how he's going to do it. Isaiah calls the readers, I think, to a faith that's realistic. A faith that looks difficult facts in the face and still chooses to trust the Lord because he is in control. And Isaiah's making it clear, way ahead of time, he is in control. So trust him. Don't hedge your bets. Don't try to cover your bases, look into gods that aren't real. Just trust the living God.
What is the bird of prey from the east?
It's also Cyrus.
Oh, it's also Cyrus, okay.
Yeah. Okay, now how does chapter 46 end in 12 and 13?
Listen to me, you stubborn-hearted, who are far from righteousness. Bring my righteousness near, it shall not be far off. My salvation shall not linger, and I will place salvation in Zion, for Israel my glory.
Yep. So they're stubborn-hearted and far from his righteousness because they refuse to obey him and they've rejected his ways. They're far from home in Babylon, but that's not the point. The point is they're far away from the righteousness of the Lord because of their sin. But he's not going to leave them there. He's still carrying them. And he's not going to leave them in Babylon. But more importantly, he's not going to leave them far away from him in their sin. He's coming near to them. He's not just bringing Cyrus. He's bringing his righteousness and his salvation to them. So he's going to give salvation to Jerusalem, his splendor to Israel. He seeks out stubborn and rebellious people and brings his righteousness and salvation to them. Now, when you read that, you know it's not Cyrus who's going to accomplish that. It's another servant who's going to accomplish that. You already get a hint that there's another servant who's got to come, and it's the Messiah. Cyrus can deliver them physically, but there's a spiritual deliverance that's going to be accomplished by someone else altogether. Okay, now, chapter 47, he's going to turn his attention fully to Babylon. So, how does chapter 47 start? In verses 1 to 3.
And come sit in the dust,
Mm-hmm. Who?
O virgin daughter of Babylon.
Yep. So in those opening verses, here's the capital city. He's addressing the capital city of Babylon, and, well, what's the image that he uses right here?
A young woman, desecrated.
Yeah. And she started off privileged and with a charmed life, right? She's the queen of the Babylonians, but she's going to be removed from her throne and reduced to sitting in the dirt. So you get this idea of a privileged and charmed life just suddenly giving way to slavery and humiliation. So that description, when it says the work, the water crossing, the exposure in verses 2 and 3, those are images that point to forced labor, captivity, and disgrace for Babylon. And the reason for this sudden reversal, well, what is it at the end of verse 3? Bad luck or something else?
Shame uncovered.
Keep going.
I will take vengeance, I will spare no one.
Yeah, so the reason Babylon's going to fall is not because they just have a lousy king, which they do. The reason they're going to fall is because the Lord is going to take vengeance against the Babylonian Empire for what they've done to his people. Now don't miss the weight of that prophecy. The God of Israel, whose city has been sacked, his temple's been leveled, his people have been taken captive, he says he's the one who's ultimately in control. It might look for a minute like he's been defeated when Babylon shows up and just takes everything. But nothing could be further from the truth. He's sovereign, and when his purposes are fulfilled, the God of little tiny Israel is going to take vengeance on this massive empire of Babylon, and he's going to reduce it to nothing. So, it's only natural that Isaiah would add what he says in verse 4. What does he say in verse 4?
Our Redeemer, the Lord Almighty is his name. He is the Holy One of Israel.
Yep, the Holy One of Israel, the one set apart, unique, completely other and righteous. He's the Redeemer of his people. He's the next of kin who frees them from bondage, who avenges he avenges those who've been wronged. And that's going to become clear when Babylon comes undone, that the Lord isn't just rescuing his people, which he is, but he's avenging them for what Babylon does to them. Why does it matter that his name is the Lord Almighty or the Lord of Hosts?
No, because they think their king is a big shot.
Yeah? How much of a big shot is the Lord?
He is the
Bigger.
one.
Right?
He's the Redeemer, the Lord of Hosts, the Holy One of Israel. So that's who he is.
Yep.
Nothing compares to him.
That's right. If he's the Lord of hosts, hi Sarah, if he is the Lord of all the armies of heaven, then you think about the massive Babylonian military, which the people of the ancient Near East thought nobody could ever overcome that kind of military. How's the Lord going to overcome them? He's the Lord of hosts. He's the Lord of all the armies of heaven. If he decides tomorrow Babylon falls, tomorrow Babylon falls. So he will bring his purposes to pass, and Babylon will not stand in his way. Okay, now what does the Lord say to Babylon then in 5 to 7?
Well, he said he was angry with his people, so he gave them into Babylon's hand, but Babylon showed them no mercy and was cruel to them.
That's right. Yeah. That opening bit in verse 5, when he says the great city of Babylon, the queen of kingdoms, is going to be reduced to silence and darkness. Imagine if New York City all of a sudden went dark and silent. That's what's being predicted for the capital city of the Babylonians. And I am guessing that it would have just been unthinkable to most people. Just the idea that the capital city of Babylon would go silent and dark when it was so impressive, it was so powerful. But here's the Lord saying that's exactly what's going to happen. Now, if the God of Israel is so powerful, why was Babylon able to conquer Judah and Jerusalem in the first place? Yeah, because the Lord was angry with his people and he brought judgment on them. It's not because Babylon's more powerful than he is, it's because he used Babylon for his own purposes. So the only reason that Babylon could desecrate Jerusalem was because the Lord desecrated his own inheritance to start with.
47.
But even though he gave his people into their hands, the Babylonians were responsible for what they did next. And what they did was to show no mercy to the people they conquered. Even the people of old age, he says, were forced into heavy work. The Babylonians considered themselves invulnerable, unconquerable, whatever the word is, immortal. Well, they sound a lot like Assyria, but they are wrong. Like, they didn't stop to think out what was really happening and to think on what the future might hold. Like, it didn't even occur to them that the downfall of Assyria might be a little object lesson for them. They just did the same thing that the Assyrians did, assuming they're all that. Well, this is the problem. What one of the writers I read said, this is the problem for people whose gods are simply themselves written large. They have no one outside of themselves, over against themselves, to remind them that even if they're the greatest the world has ever seen, they are not the standard of greatness. Mm-hmm. God is the standard, and all of us, from the greatest to the least, are measured against him, not ourselves. And more to the point, we answer to him and not ourselves. They have no idea they're going to have to answer to the God of Israel. They're acting like they're not accountable to anybody. They can do whatever they want. Well, now, what does the Lord say to them in verses 8 and 9?
Listen, you lover of pleasure, lounging in your security, saying to yourself, there is none besides me. I will never be a widow or suffer the loss of children. These will overtake you in a moment, in a single day, in full measure, despite your claims of power through sorcery.
So again, we have this really vivid metaphor of Babylon as a woman, this time just indulging in pleasure, doing whatever she wants, lounging around, thinking she's all that. Did you catch what she says to herself? What does she say? The first thing she says?
I am forever.
I am, and there is none besides me. Does that sound familiar?
Oh.
Who's been saying that? God. Okay, so here's Babylon taking the words that only apply to the Lord and saying those words themselves. It's not just that Babylon is proud, it's that Babylon equates themselves with God. They're deifying themselves by saying, we're it, and there's nobody else. That this woman, this metaphorical woman, thinks of herself as just having God-like self-sufficiency. And she assumes she'll never suffer loss. You just hear the pride in that Babylon thinks they're untouchable, that no God can even touch them because of who they are. But the Lord says that's not the case. Both widowhood and loss of children are going to overtake her in a moment, in a single day. She is not God, which means she is totally vulnerable to the God who is God. And the end of verse 9 is really interesting, that all of this loss is going to come against Babylon, despite all of their sorceries and their spells. Okay, why did he throw that in right there? Because that's how you get access to God if you're an idol worshiper, right? The false gods don't reveal themselves the way the Lord does. The false gods are gods you have to get at through divination and sorcery and superstition, all that kind of stuff. So Babylon's sense of security is found in these false gods, and so of course divination is how they get access to their God. In fact, the Babylonians, or the Chaldeans, your translation might say, they were infamous for this, for their magic arts, for their sorcery and their astrology and all of that, which of course gets put front and center in the book of Daniel. We're going to come back to that in just a minute. So here they are, looking to their sorcery, to their false gods to rescue them. What's coming? What does he say in 10 and 11?
to mislead you when you say to yourself, I am, and there is none beside me. Disaster will come upon you, and you will not know how to conjure it away. A calamity will fall upon you that you cannot ward off with a ransom. A catastrophe you cannot foresee will suddenly come upon you.
Mhm. So that metaphor
So-
continues. Yeah, go ahead, Liz.
They'll be destroyed.
Yes, they will. Yep. And here's this woman who feels completely secure and confident in her wickedness. She trusts in the evil things she's doing and says, no one sees me. Well, the idea being that there's no thought of accountability. There's no higher authority that Babylon has to answer to. All their worldly wisdom and knowledge has just made them terribly arrogant, misleading them into thinking they're on par with God. Did you catch it again? That they say, I am, and there is none besides me. So no point in bothering about God if you think you're all that. But God says disaster's coming upon the empire, and then all the magic and sorcery is going to fail them. When the disaster comes, they're not even going to know where it comes from or what to do about it. And they won't be able to conjure it away, and they won't be able to bribe their way out of it, because it's going to be the Lord's doing, and there's going to be no escape for them. In fact, the fortune tellers won't even see the catastrophe coming. It's going to come suddenly, and the Babylonians, whose magic arts are so renowned, they're going to be completely caught off guard and unable to save themselves. Now, I find this really interesting when you think about Daniel chapter 5. So Daniel chapter 5 is the chapter where you get the handwriting on the wall. So the Babylonian king, Belshazzar, historically we know the Persian army is right outside the gates of the city. But in Daniel 5, the king of Babylon's having a drinking party. Do you remember whose cups he's using at his drinking party? The Lord's cups from the temple that were taken from the temple. So he's sitting there mocking the God of Israel with his cups as he's at his drinking party. And God actually writes out on the wall, writes it out, what's about to happen. And the first thing that they do is they call their magicians, their astrologers, their sorcerers. And what do they say? Did they figure it out? They have no clue. I mean, God writes it out for them, and they can't read it, they can't understand it, they have no idea what the Lord has just told them, which is, it's going to be all over tonight. So then they have to call Daniel to read it for them. Think about the irony of that here are the fortune tellers, the diviners, the sorcerers, and on the night when Babylon falls, they have no clue what's coming. They don't see it coming. They don't predict that it's going to happen. Even when God spells it out on the wall, they still don't understand that the empire is about to fall. What good are they? Like, they really are not going to save Babylon from what's coming. They're not even going to know it's coming themselves. Yeah, and it's going to be over in one night. They're going to go to bed Babylonians, and they're going to wake up Persians. And the magicians are going to have no idea that it was coming. It's just, the irony is amusing and painful at the same time. That here they are trusting in the diviners to tell them the future. And even with the Persian army outside the gates, they're going to miss it. And the Lord has told his people ahead of time that's what's going to happen. He's already said, when the Babylonian Empire falls, their magicians aren't going to see it coming. They're not going to have any idea that calamity has showed up. And even if they did, they wouldn't be able to rescue anyone out of it. Okay, and then in verses 12 and 13, it's like he just ratchets up the sarcasm. What does he say?
It's pretty sarcastic. So perhaps. Stand fast now in your spells and your sorceries which you have labored from your youth. Perhaps you will be able to profit. Perhaps you may cause trembling. You are wearied with your many counsels. Let now the astrologers and those who prophesy by the stars, those who predict by new moons, stand up and save you from what will come upon you.
Oh, man.
Let them try.
Yep. He's like, yeah, when the catastrophe comes, do it. Let them keep on with their sorcery. Let them keep doing whatever they've been doing throughout history. Maybe all those spells will succeed and bring terror on their enemies. Yeah, I mean, the irony is that all of that divination is a lot of work, and all the different sources of counsel just make them tired. They're not actually helping anything. They're just making everybody exhausted. Well, you got to carry your own God, remember? The divination is basically carrying your own God. That's what they're doing. And you don't have any choice but to continue doing that if there's nothing beyond you. If your God is a God that you've made up for yourself, that is just a reflection of who you are, well, then you don't have any choice but to just keep on doing all that tiresome stuff. And all the false religion just wears them out. But he says, let them carry on. Let their astrologers and their stargazers predict the future and come forward and save Babylon from the disaster that's coming. Again, they're known for their wisdom, but the Lord has already said he is going to frustrate the wisdom of the false gods and the people who worship them. And he's telling them, even on the day when destruction comes, it's going to be really clear where wisdom is found. And it's not found in these false gods. It's found in the living God. And then what does he say in 14 and 15?
They're like stubble. The fire will burn them up. They cannot save themselves from the power of the flame. No coals to warm anyone, and no fire to sit by.
So these magicians, maybe it looks like they're kind of embers of a nice fire you can come and sit by to get warm, like they're going to comfort the people or help them, but actually they're just fuel for the fire. They're not going to save anybody. They can't even save themselves. And the disaster that's coming is not going to be a little campfire. It's going to be a consuming wildfire. And then he says in 15, these counselors that Babylon has done business with and labored with all through their history, those men are not spiritual leaders. They're just merchants of magic. And when their magic fails and their errors are exposed, then what? They're going to repent, right? What are they going to do?
Wander about in their own direction.
They're going to make their exit. They're going to abandon the customers and make their exit. They're going to go their own way, and there's going to be nobody to save Babylon. They're going to be left to their captivity because their gods can't save them, their magicians can't save them. When the Lord decides enough of Babylon, nothing will be able to deliver them from his hand. So when the crisis comes, Babylon's going to have nowhere to turn but to herself, and that's not going to be enough. But when the crisis comes to Jerusalem, where did they turn? Where should they turn?
God.
Because they have a God who's outside of themselves. They have a God who's bigger than just whatever they made up. So destruction's coming for Babylon, just like destruction comes for Jerusalem. But the difference is that there's not going to be any restoration of Babylon because there's no God looking after them. But there's going to be restoration of Jerusalem because the Lord's going to deliver the people and bring them back. He's the creator. He's the Holy One of Israel. He's the Savior. Those few words at the end of verse 15, it's like they capture the whole argument of chapters 40 to 47, which is everybody needs a Savior. The gods and the magical worldview that they rest on can't save them, but the God who stands outside of creation and directs it for his purposes, he's the one who can save. And he keeps saying these things over and over and over with the implied question to his people, so who are you going to trust? When you're in the middle of suffering, decide who you're going to trust. Mm-hmm. Because if you put your trust in the wrong God, emptiness is on the other side of that. But if you trust in the living God in the middle of your difficulties, he's got all of it under control, and deliverance is going to be the last word, not destruction. Okay, how are those things relevant to us?
It's a.
Keep talking.
We're watching our nation crumble, and we're not Israel, but his elect are here. And for those that are called and will seek him, that's where our deliverance will come from.
Do you have any gods you have to carry around? They're tempting, aren't they? I was just thinking about that the other day with your bank account.
Mm-hmm.
It's a God you have to carry around, isn't it? Because all the pressure's on you. You're the one who's got to fill it up. Well, how many?
Use it wisely.
That's right. That's right. It's a God you have to carry. Well, everything is apart from the living God, a God you have to carry. Anything else?
And the handwriting's on the wall. I think we all see that too. So, and we have the benefit of having had an interpreter for us.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, I couldn't help but thinking about it today as we're packing up our house and saying goodbye to a lot of stuff that we've had, which we must do. And I'm wondering if those things are my idols, or are they somehow some kind of security? Is an idol a security too? You know, we like to have our things around us, and what is that? And I agree that it's not an idol, because I've been able to say goodbye to a lot of this stuff, and it's not making me cry, so I think that's God's doing too, that you can let go of it. But it's just something that made me think about what our stuff is to us. Security blanket.
It's the, what you're used to,
I guess.
somewhat.
Yeah.
When I moved from my home into town, obviously into a smaller dwelling, and so there are things that won't fit and you get rid of, and they are things.
Yeah, right.
And there might be some, sentimental value, you know, so-and-so gave it to you, and but now there's really not room, and that kind of thing. But they're things.
And then when you have the blessing of a daughter coming with her family, or living
Yes.
close to family,
Yeah.
and daughters that are caring for you and helping you through
Yeah.
all of that, that's a provision of the Lord.
Well, and then looking through the old things, you know, like cards and things like that, you review the blessings those were at that time,
Yeah.
you know, at the time, and what good
Uh-huh.
memories those are.
Yeah.
So that's what you keep,
Some things that, yeah.
memories, not the things.
Right. But the things remind you, but, and so then I discarded a lot of that paper stuff, you know, that, those lovely reminders, but
Yeah, you can't keep them all.
no,
You just can't.
but they're paper, for instance.
Paper things, yeah, but I get hung up on, most of my furniture is stuff, my dining room table was my grandparents' kitchen table.
Yeah.
Those are the kinds of things
Oh.
that are hard,
Mhm.
but they're also memories that, you know, how are we supposed to honor our family that's gone before us? You know, I don't know. It's fun.
And it's hard because,
It's a interesting conversation.
well, it's hard too, because the children, like my children, do not know my parents very
Right.
well, because we lived so
Right.
far away, and I didn't get to see them or interact with them very much. So things that are maybe my mother's, that I prize, the children do not prize
They
the
don't-
same way.
Yes.
They
Yeah.
don't, not in the same.
I mean, you
Yeah.
know, they want some of those things too, because they were grandparents, they were
Right.
with them, but
Right.
still didn't know them,
But-
so it's hard.
But you know, the Jewish people were real high on genealogy, and was that a man-made concept, or is that something that honors God in following, you know, God has Jesus' genealogy in there. And I think back on that quite a bit, because I have some, you know, I inherited the suitcase of family pictures from my father's mother's side of the family, and, you know, I've gone through there. I can remember going through that, all those pictures with my grandmother, who was born in the 1800s and had traveled, you know, in a wagon, in a car, in a train, and, you know, and had all those experiences. And she was a seamstress, and we look at those pictures with those button sleeves and all those pleats and all that fancy filigree, and she'd say, I made that dress. She didn't make it on a $15,000 Bernina. No, she had a needle and a thread and saved up her money and bought the treadle singer when it came out. And those memories of what those people that have gone before us, that's where my memory of my ancestry dies. Because, what led up to that in all those 2,000 years or 6,000 years? How do we, I don't know, it's an interesting topic of letting go of the things of our lives.
So much depends on motive, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, it depends on the motivation.
What our heart is.
What is it that you're getting from it?
Well, I think of my home and so a lot of my things as blessings.
Mhm.
Because I would work as a nurse and I got off at 11 at night and I worked hard and I could go to church and I don't know, I could do things. Maybe be a light, or I'm not the light, I can,
No, you have Jesus' light in you, John.
yeah, but Jesus is the light, yeah. And anyway, yeah, it was wonderful getting off at 11 and opening the door, looking at the phone and seeing if there's messages there. But you're just gonna have to take a few things and not all of that stuff.
Right.
But that's been a place for you, a place of comfort and peace. And you have your piano and music and.
Well, and there are all these blessings that God gives us that it's right to enjoy, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then there comes a point where when God starts to strip those things away,
Mm-hmm.
then you start to find out what is a blessing that I enjoy. Having to look at it and say, okay, I don't think this is my God. I don't think this is my security. But it's a good thing to stop and think, is it?
Yeah, right.
Are those things more important than they should be? They're good things and they're blessings. But if they become my security, God is my security. He's the one who's going to go with you. If you lose everything on the way to Great Falls, you've still got God on the other end when you get there, right? And if you have Him, you have everything.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, I'll have to say that He's made it easy to say goodbye to a lot of things, and that's good because
That's good.
enough stuff around for enough years. We don't need to haul around anymore. And like I say, the things that I want the children to know are the blessings of their grandparents and great-grandparents passing on the faith to them, to us, to all of us. And that's the best thing. That's the best thing that they could have done for us. I mean, and you find that out when you start going through your parents' stuff and having help get rid of that. And you say, well, what did my parents leave for me? What they left for me was my faith in the Lord. That they made sure that I had, and all of us did.
Yep.
So
I'm doing the same thing and cleaning things out when I'm not tired. And as I look at these things, I think, wow, which is material and what has added spiritual content and what can add spiritual content to my children. And here I sit today with my mother's Bible and all her wonderful notes that she has, and my dad's Bible, and I go back and refer and I think, wow, Mom and Daddy, you knew these things. How beautiful, and how they're so living to me now. So, in fact, when they passed in Washington State, I was still in Wyoming, I was still in Lander, and we traveled back there, and by the time I got there, everybody was taken, and they said, well, here's their Bibles, and I said, that's perfect. That's what I want. So I didn't get anything, which was just fine. I'm so thankful because I'd have to get rid of all that stuff now, but I have what they had in their faith.
You have the most precious thing.
I do, and I refer back, my mother was in Bible study fellowship leader, and so she would constantly write these things in her Bible, and now I'm in John and going, wow, that is so good, Mom.
I have a friend whose husband lost his job a couple weeks ago. She texted me and she said, please pray for us. She said, the thing is, it had become an idol to him and he didn't realize it until it was gone. And now he's starting to see it and it's a beautiful thing. That's what she said. It hurts and it's a beautiful thing. Well, isn't that right? Like, it's a painful thing when God starts stripping away your false gods, but it's a merciful thing that he does that, because then you learn to rely on him. Yeah. All right, your last comments?
It's funny that a job, something that sustains you like that, becomes an idol. It's, you know, you think of what God gives you, and you think of what the job gives you, and you think, well, it all comes from God, so why is it so hard to let go of? You know, it should be an easy thing to let go of, because He's the one that gave it to you to begin with.
And with that, I have to add, I'm losing my hair, something awful. It's just, it's not coming out in big chunks. It just, if I touched it, it would just all over. And with that, I think that, you know, God, you gave me this hair.
Yeah.
Just exactly what you said.
Yeah. All right, any last comments? Anything you want to add? Okay.
I just told Sally that if we get time at Thursday morning Bible study,